Quantum computing is cutting-edge technology that can transform the world. It's even faster than supercomputers, and they'll be able to solve complex problems in record speeds. So why is that a bad thing? Hello and welcome to CyberCast by UNSW Security Society. My name is Dini and I'm here to talk about post-quantum cryptography. So nowadays, all of our communications are relatively secure. And by secure, I mean that any information that's being transferred, stored, or processed is, for the most part, encrypted by cryptographic algorithms that prevent threat actors from being able to read it. And this way, even if someone somehow got a hold of your information for malicious purposes, they wouldn't be able to read it, simply because it would look like a freaking garbled mess. And we can thank modern cryptography for that. When encrypting messages, we have algorithms, but we also have a key that works with the algorithm to ensure that the encrypted message truly appears random. So there are two ways to encrypt things nowadays. So the first method is using symmetric encryption, and that is both parties use the same key, and the second method is asymmetric encryption. It's also known as public key cryptography, and this is where the sender and receiver use different keys. So we'll be focused on this particular method. In public key cryptography, the sender uses a public key that's known to everyone in order to encrypt a message, and the recipient uses a private key to decrypt the message. So for the message to stay confidential and for the recipient to still be able to decrypt the message, we rely on mathematical problems that are proven to be hard and lengthy to solve. So let's look at Ramesh Shamir Adelman's crypto system, also known as RSA. RSA uses what we call a trapdoor permutation, and a trapdoor permutation is a function that is easy to compute but hard to invert, even if you knew everything about it. So this is the basis of public key cryptography. Our first step to RSA is generating keys. So how this works is we get two very large prime numbers that we keep a secret. We'll call them P and we'll call them Q. And we compute the product of P and Q, which we'll call N. Then we calculate the totient of N, which sounds really complicated, and it is. But in our case, we'll just say that the totient of N is brackets P minus 1 multiplied by brackets Q minus 1. And it's pretty simple. They're going to be integers, right? So now we can find our public key, and the criteria for our public key, we'll call it E, is a number that meets these three criteria. It has to be a prime number, it has to be less than the totient, and it must not be a factor of the totient in order to make it truly secure. Then our private key, which we'll call D, which we use to decrypt, must meet one criteria. It must be a number that multiplied by the public key, then divided by the totient, results in a remainder of 1. And if you know math, this simply means that E multiplied D modulo the totient is 1. And to encrypt, we simply raise the plain text message to the power of our public key modulo N, and to decrypt, we raise our ciphertext to the power of our private key. And the reason why this is so secure is if you pick P and Q wisely, such that both are very large. It takes a standard computer an incredibly long time to find P and Q just from N. But with the advent of quantum computers, that will no longer be true. To tell you how inefficient it is on our computers, in 1994, they tried to factor a 128-digit number, which took the computation power of 1,600 computers. And to factor a 232-digit number, it would take 2,000 years of computation. You see, classical computers operate using ones and zeros. We call them bits. So in this case, a bit can represent either a 1 or 0, which we use to describe and do just about anything your computers can do, which is fantastic. That's how we got here technologically. But it's still limited, as we see with the example of RSA. Then comes the quantum computer, which operates on a physical state called qubits, which means that we can represent a bit as either a 1 or a 0 to the degree that we choose. Now, the math behind this is a little bit difficult to understand, and quantum mechanics is a pretty advanced topic which I won't delve too far into. But let's just say that a quantum computer can do so many calculations all at the same time. And what's the problem with this, especially when it comes to cryptography? Well, it turns out that there's a nifty little algorithm called Shor's algorithm that can actually efficiently compute the primes of n in RSA. Shor's algorithm starts by making a random guess at a number smaller than n that shares a factor with n, but most likely doesn't. Then the algorithm takes that guess, uses a little bit of maths, and it turns it into a better guess, which does share a factor with n. Classical computers can't do this because it processes information differently from a quantum computer. However, because quantum computers can run algorithms in parallel, this makes Shor's algorithm extremely efficient on a quantum computer. Hence, if a quantum computer were to break RSA that has been implemented correctly, it would be incredibly fast. Now, the issue with this is that RSA is commonly used nowadays, so a lot of our communications, our information, all of that will soon be easily broken by quantum computers. Now, RSA isn't the only algorithm that is victim to this. Elliptic curve cryptosystem is also based on a hard problem that will be susceptible to a quantum computer. AES 128 is susceptible due to Grover's algorithm, but the good news is that AES 256 is not. So right now, quantum computers aren't accessible and they're huge machines unlike computers now. However, classical computers back in the day used to also be massive. So who's to say that we won't have a quantum computer in our pockets in 10 years? Now, the issue with cryptography, as always, is that only time and computing power gets to decide whether information is kept safe or not. Now, all this talk seems frightening, but there may be solutions. The National Institute of Standards and Technology, also known as NIST, nominated a few cryptographic algorithms that are deemed to be quantum safe, such as Crystal's Kyber, Crystal's Dilithium, Sphinx, and Falcon, which are either lattice-based or hash-based algorithms. Now, fortunately, we don't need a quantum computer to implement post-quantum cryptography. In fact, these algorithms, they run just fine on a classical computer. The problem now comes with implementing these algorithms. In practice, we're still worried about performance issues and the cost of using these algorithms. Quantum cryptography comes with a lot of overhead. For example, Google tried implementing Kyber, but Kyber requires a lot more data, which affected Google's performance. As a result, they may or may not have abandoned the use of Kyber. However, they did end up switching to another NIST-approved encryption algorithm that's a modified version of Kyber called Module Lattice Key Encapsulation Mechanism, and will continue to provide post-quantum cryptography on Google services. As we move forward, we hope to see a lot of progress in not only the quantum computing space, but also the cryptography space, so that we stay protected all the time as we face the craziest technological challenges of our time. We should also be wary ourselves and really educate ourselves on how the services that we use keep our information safe to prevent ourselves from being victims of store now, decrypt later schemes. But as for now, we can only stay updated and continue to advance the field of cybersecurity. And that's it for today. This has been CyberCast by UNSW Security Society. My name is Dini. Thanks for listening, and remember to stay cyber aware. Until next time.